Thank you for joining. Welcome to our No Beijing 2022 Olympic Torch press conference. We're live in Athens here today, and I'm sure you'll all agree this has been a really eventful 48 hours during which we have yet again borne witness to the hypocrisy of the International Olympic Committee, who have staged another ceremony where they're claiming the ideals of the Olympic truce of peace, unity, and humanity, when the reality is that once again they're handing over the Olympic torch to a host government that is so far removed while holding any of these ideals. It seems we're living in a kind of warped reality. Before we start today's session, we're going to hold a moment's silence for all of those who are living under Chinese Communist Party repression and who have lost their lives for standing up for freedom and democracy. Thank you for joining us in our moment of silence. Before we begin hearing from the activists, I'd like to announce to everyone who's joining us online, if you're journalists and you're wanting to ask questions, please do start stacking questions in the chat area, just so that we can start the Q&A really quickly after we've finished with our presentations. I'd now like to just introduce ourselves to you very briefly. My name is Mandy McKeown. I'm the Executive Director for International Tibet Network. And with me here today on our panel are two highly esteemed colleagues of mine, Zimrate Arkin. Zimrate is the Programme and Advocacy Manager for World Uyghur Congress, an umbrella organisation working for the rights of the Uyghur people. And Pema Doma. Pema is a Tibetan American activist and the campaigns director for Students for a Free Tibet, a global organisation working with students and youth to campaign for the freedom and basic rights of the Tibetan people. And without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Zimrate.
Thank you, Mandy, for the kind introduction. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Zimrate Arkin. I am a Uyghur Canadian and Program Advocacy Manager at the World Uyghur Congress. Thank you all for being here in great number. I first want to salute all my colleagues here who have been arrested in the past 48 hours in Athens and Olympia for simply protesting the Beijing Olympics being held in China ahead of the Olympics torch relay. The Olympic torch is supposed to represent peace and hope, but for our people who are living under the brutal Chinese Communist Party, this represents global complicity in China's extreme repression. I am sitting here with over 40 family members who have disappeared or are interned in concentration camps in East Turkestan. And this is why the Olympic Games cannot take place in China. If the same protest were to take place in East Turkestan, Tibet, Hong Kong, Southern Mongolia, or in China, my colleagues here wouldn't be sitting next to me. If this press conference was to take place in China, I, as a Uyghur, would end up in a camp and may be subjected to sexual abuse and torture, as millions of my fellow Uyghurs are. The fact that my friends and colleagues protested in a democratic country but still got detained is outrageous. And this is exactly why we're in Athens today, to tell to the international community that the Olympic Games are being handed over to a country actively committing a genocide. And that although we have a backup plan, millions of Uyghurs, Tibetans, Hong Kongers, Southern Mongolians, and Chinese aren't as privileged as us. Is the IOC willing to take responsibility for protesters being arrested in Beijing during the Games? Will the IOC continue to reiterate that the human rights situation in China is not within its remit while claiming that human rights are part of the Olympics Charter? We are expecting the G7 governments to boycott the Winter Olympic Games in Beijing. In the face of a genocide and severe crimes against humanity, how could these governments be silent while at the same time denouncing the same human rights violations during high-level meetings? This is your chance to take a real stand for human rights. We will be watching. Thank you.
Thank you, Samratai. Pema.
Great, I think I have all of the mics and technology set up. Hi everyone, as Mandy mentioned, my name is Pema Doma. I am a Tibetan American and I am the campaigns director for Students for a Free Tibet. As I speak to you here today, the Chinese government is actively waging an unrelenting war in Tibet. In order to wipe out the resistance to Chinese rule and occupation, the authorities have launched an all-out final assault on Tibetans with the goal of destroying everything that makes us who we are, our language, our religion, and our traditional customs and way of life. And they have specifically targeted all of the children, including very young children in elementary and even preschool age, with almost completely Chinese language education school experiences and full political indoctrination that is meant to replace their identity as a Tibetan with one of a Chinese nationalist. At that time, they are forcing and coercing more and more Tibetan parents to put their children in residential schools, meaning their children are sent far away from their homes, separated for long periods from their families and from their parents, made to speak and learn Chinese, made to think in Chinese, forbidden from practicing Buddhism, and unable to access their authentic way of life as a Tibetan and their authentic culture. We are calling these programs as residential schools because they have so many terrible similarities to those residential schooling programs which had originally been forced upon indigenous people in North America. But the horrors taking place in Tibet are barely known or understood by the international community. I am constantly being asked as a Tibetan, what is happening in Tibet? Why do we not hear anything about Tibet in the news? And this is because China has successfully imposed a near total lockdown in Tibet, where there is a complete information blackout. Most Tibetans have a hard time, nearly impossible even getting out. The international community, including the media, cannot get in. Many of the journalists who are joining us here today may have tried or may one day try and be denied access. And Tibetans risk their lives if they dare to even make contact with those outside of the country. Simply even for having basic relations with those outside of the country, they can be risking their actual lives, and let alone sending out any information about the situation on the ground. There are thousands of Tibetans every year who used to escape over foot over the Himalayan mountains into Nepal and India every year as refugees. This year, only 5 Tibetans were reported of being able to make it out alive successfully. This is due to the ubiquitous surveillance, facial recognition technology, as well as the use of drones and increased patrols on the borders, even on the highest mountain passes. While the level of repression increases, there's also a tightening security, which makes it impossible for Tibetans to escape. In January this year, for the first time, Freedom House ranked Tibet alongside Syria as the least free place on the entire earth in its annual ranking on civil and political rights in the world. I want to be clear with everyone listening here today. that it is not just since the 2008 Beijing Olympics that this human rights escalation has happened, but rather in part it is actually because of the 2008 Games in Beijing that the situation on the ground in Tibet has gone from bad to worse. I believe the repression in Tibet is in part due to China being able to host the Games in the first place, because they were given the legitimacy of the international community bestowed upon them and the Chinese Communist Party by allowing them to host the Olympics, bestowed on them by the IOC. Even when China and the CCP had just launched a massive military and security crackdown in Tibet, Chinese leaders were signaled that the free world didn't necessarily care about these policies and these behaviors. At the exact moment when we as an international community should have been using symbolic political leverage to push Beijing for more accountability and to actually improve its human rights records, we actually sent the opposite message. We said, go ahead, don't worry, there is no cost, no price to pay for any of your actions against Tibetans, against Uyghurs, and against Hong Kongers and others. And so now in 2021, where are we? We have watched an increasingly emboldened China, increasingly emboldened Beijing, especially under Xi Jinping, go further and further into building an Orwellian state, a totalitarian state that is now actively committing genocide in East Turkestan, crushing democracy in Hong Kong, cracking down on civil society and faith communities and LGBT communities in China itself, as well as threatening democratic Taiwan. And in the midst of this escalating crisis of repression, what does the IOC choose to do? Does it choose to draw a red line on genocide? It chooses to continue to ignore the facts on the ground, turn a blind eye to genocide and Xi Jinping's vicious campaign of repression. It pushes ahead with yet another plan to confer a badge of global legitimacy to the Chinese government by allowing them to host the 2022 Winter Olympics. This behavior is not only outrageous, it is immoral and criminal. It is essentially aiding and abetting the Beijing regime to carry out its propaganda and to cover up a sports washing of its genocide. We must not allow it to happen. We are all here at this critical moment in history. While there is still some time to make a difference, there is still time for us to say, enough is enough. These games cannot go ahead as planned. They must be postponed. There has to be a red line that governments, national Olympic committees, sponsors and broadcasters, and even athletes will be refusing to cross. And that line must be genocide and crimes against humanity, such as we have seen here in Tibet against the Uyghurs and in all of the land that the CCP is controlling. Thank you.
Thank you to both of you for these really moving and very insightful opening remarks. Before we move on with some questions from journalists here, one of my colleagues is going to pass around a mic. We just want to give some clarification as to what has happened with our colleagues who are still in Olympia, detained, or who have been released. So I'm going to pass over to Pema to give a very quick update as to the status of the activists.
Thank you, Manju. Over the past several days, there have been student activists from many different areas that have decided to take action and stand against the IOC's decision to host the Olympics in Beijing. Of those activists, 18-year-old Tibetan American Sela Zoksang and 22-year-old Joey Su were detained and arrested here in Athens. They were held overnight and they were taken to court, and after this, they were released, and they are currently free and have been released from the jail where they were being held. They currently face charges, and they will be further kind of working with the legal process with their next court date being in January. And the other three activists who were detained, Tibetan Canadian activist Chimi Lamu and British activist Jason Leith and American activist Fern McDougall, are still currently being held in Olympia for their protest against the IOC and the Beijing 2022 delegation in Olympia yesterday during the torch lighting ceremony. Currently, we do have a colleague on the ground who is making sure for their well-being, physical and emotional, and they seem to be in okay condition right now. They will be seeing a court sometime today. No time has been guaranteed to them at this moment, and they are still figuring out what the charges or consequences that will be held against them for taking bold action against the IOC yesterday will be. It is unknown at this time what the charges will be.
Thank you, Pema. So moving on to a couple of questions from journalists online, and then we'll pass to the floor. So the first question I wanted to pose over to you firstly, Zumratay. In your opinion, how does this year's protests and activism against Beijing 2022 Olympics compare with the protests responding to the 2008 Olympic Games?
Thank you, Mandy, for the question, and to Eva Xiao for submitting this. I do think that there's a huge difference between the protests that happened in 2008 and the protests that are taking place today ahead of the Beijing 2022 Games, because I think that in 2008 it was on a much smaller scale. Not to minimize, the importance of the protests that took place inside China in 2008. We have colleagues here who were present during the games in Beijing as well, who were arrested as well. But I think what is different, the main difference is that so many more communities have embarked on this journey. We have been working for over nearly 2 years now with, Uyghur communities, Hong Kong communities, Tibetan, Southern Mongolian, Chinese, and Taiwanese communities, all under the one, under the same message, which is no genocide games, no Beijing 2022. It has been remarkable, what we have achieved in such a short amount of time. We've made the headlines on many occasions, and I think we have really come unified and one under one message. And I think no one can stop us, not the IOC, not governments, not sponsors, not athletes. We are unified on this issue and we will not stop. And this is also, I think it proves that this is beyond also the games. We're here to shine light on all of the different abuses. And I think this has been really, really remarkable because it's not just about, the genocide in East Turkestan, it's also about all of the different repressions that are happening throughout China. And I think the mobilization that we've managed to achieve is really incredible. And I think also another great difference is that today we're talking about more openly the responsibility of all the different stakeholders, not only the International Olympics Committee, but athletes, sponsors, broadcasters, National Olympic Committees, and governments. And we believe that we have a better chance today ahead of the games, that governments commit to a boycott of the games than what we had previously in 2008.
Pema, did you want to add to that question?
Yes, I can also add, in addition to my colleague Zumratay, that I can echo the sentiments of my colleague Zumratay in saying that in 2008, the international community at large, they may have been aware of protests, or they may have been aware of some, discontent with the IOC's decision making. But I think that I sit here today in 2021 alongside my Uyghur friend and colleague, and we took action here in Greece over the past several days alongside Hong Kongers and Tibetan youth, Canadian, Swiss, and American allies. And I think that I can say beyond a reasonable doubt that everybody in the international community has their eyes on the IOC today in a way that is unprecedented. And I think if the IOC thinks that they can continue business as usual, they will get away with it. I think they're gravely mistaken. The situation has changed, and I think the international community is taking notice. They are aware of the genocide. I don't think there are many people today who don't know about the Uyghur genocide. And I think that the occupation of Tibet, the situation in Hong Kong, where there are over 10,000, activists and political activists, many of whom are just, teenagers and university students that are currently behind bars as we speak. I think these things have not gone unnoticed to the international community. China's behavior has not gone unnoticed, and therefore the IOC must react accordingly.
Thank you, Pema. So I'm going to pose this to both of you. Zumrata, maybe you go first, and then hand to Pema. So in your opinion, where do you think the international community is on this? Have they been responsive? Are they being responsive? And in terms of how governments, companies, broadcasters, sponsors, do you think there is the possibility that there will be a boycott of Beijing 2022?
I think the international community has taken this issue seriously. There has been, international outcry on the fact that the Beijing Games are being hosted during a genocide. Many parliaments around the world, including my own country, Canada, has adopted resolutions in parliament calling for, moving the games outside of China. So in European countries as well, such as the Netherlands, parliament members around the world are also talking about this issue, but it is not enough. Talking about an issue on paper or in parliaments is not going to change things. We need concrete actions. We need governments to commit, especially G7 governments, given that they have been raising the Uyghur genocide and other crimes in China. So in so many different high-level meetings, they need to commit to a boycott. This is their only chance. If they don't commit to a boycott, how are we going to take them seriously the next times? So I think while there is an international outcry on this specific issue of the games being hosted in China, there's not enough concrete actions. And we're hoping that we're less than 4 months away from the games. And we're hoping that in the upcoming months, there will be concrete, meaningful actions from governments, athletes as well. We have seen a few athletes speak out on this issue, saying that, it's a very difficult position to be in, choosing between their career and choosing to compete in an Olympic Games during a genocide, because the medals that they're going to win are going to be tainted with the bloods of millions of people who are suffering. And while journalists keep telling us, or international community keep reminding us that, it's not the fault of the athletes, we agree, it's not their fault. This is all because of the International Olympic Committee. This is them, putting them in this difficult situation. And I tell to the athletes, we support you, we want you to be our allies, and meanwhile, while you might be losing one Olympic Games, we have lost our entire families. Let that sink in.
Thank you, Zumratai. I think the message that Zumratai was sending about what it means for us to ask an athlete to consider this issue, to ask an athlete what it means for them to participate in the 2022 Beijing Olympics is extremely poignant. I think when I think of Tibetans, some of whom have been exiled, outcasted from their homes, haven't seen their families, have been separated from their families for decades. I think about those in Hong Kong, students that are 22, 23 years old, who packed their bag one day and got on a flight, not knowing if they'll ever see their hometown again. That's the kind of experience that young people from our community, the same age as many of these athletes, have been enduring for the past several years. So I think that when we ask the international community, when we seek support and solidarity from viewers of the Olympics, from athletes, from governments, from G7 countries, I think what we're asking is not for them to take a political stand against, one type of ideology or another. This is actually putting those that are being impacted the most by this issue in a position where they're being made into a token, a piece in a puzzle, when in reality, what we're asking is for them to listen to our stories and ask themselves, is it right for them to participate in the sports washing of suffering of our people? And if it's not right for them to do so, what are they going to do about it? What can they do about it? What can we do about it together as an international community?
Thank you, Pema. I'm now going to pass the floor. Philip, did you want to ask a question?
Yes, please. Yeah. To start with,
Are you asking about the
ones that were
from Athens?
Away of the department on the Acropolis, yes.
So the two activists who were arrested in Athens were 18-year-old Tibetan American Tel Zoksong and 22-year-old Joey Su, Hong Kong American Joey Su. They have been released, and there is serious concern about how the Beijing government may try to interfere in the democratic process of the proceedings that they will face here in Greece. As of right now, they have the charges have actually been extremely unclear. We have a lawyer. We have actually a team of lawyers that are working with them and the Greek court to establish more clear final words on what their charges will be. The only thing that we know for certain is that they have been released and they are both attempting to return home to the safety of the United States at this time. And they will be back, their cases will be back in court in January, by which point we certainly will have more formal charges. Most likely also in the coming days, we will have more concrete word on what the formal charges are. As of right now, what we've been given is kind of just more of a legal jargon, which I would leave to lawyers to comment on about what potential charges may be. And, they've kind of brought out a laundry list of charges, which, I can comment here that many of them are things that prior folks that have done similar things at the Acropolis have not been charged with, but they've been waving around this list. And I think that many of those things may come from the pressure, outside pressures of, having a tight consequence on student activists that are bold enough to have a message for the world.
Thank you, Pema. Philip, I'm not sure whether you had another question.
Yes, yeah, I do actually. Do you feel you have actually achieved by what you've done over the last few days?
For our Zoom audience, I'm just going to repeat the question. So the question is basically, and I paraphrase you, Philip, is what impact do you think staging protests at an event such as the handing over of the Olympic torch to the Beijing hosts? I'm going to pass to Zimratai first, or to Pema.
Thank you for the question. I think what the goal of these protests, of these student activists, has been since the first protest is to start an international dialogue, exactly what we're doing here today, to start a conversation where people, everyday people around the world, global citizens of different countries, can start to ask themselves, what does it mean for me to support and endorse this Olympics? What does it mean for me in my everyday behavior to tune in? And I think that we have been really extremely successful in doing that. And I think about the students, the 18 and 22-year-olds, Chimi Lamu from University of Toronto, an alum of University of Toronto. I think seeing the actions that they have taken, I think they have been extremely successful in raising this to a global platform. And most importantly, to start a dialogue. And in regards to the comment by the IOC, I think it was best said by like Yacho from Human Rights Foundation on Twitter. Although the IOC has claimed that these protests have marred a cultural event, the question to them would be then, so what about the genocide which has marred the entire tradition of the Olympic Games? I was actually extremely surprised when I found out that for the first time that the Olympic Games were started as a moment of truce between conflicting groups. And when I think about conflicting groups, I think about Tibetans and Uyghurs and Chinese. And what a better example. And yet there is no Tibetan flag represented in the Olympic Games. There are no Tibetans invited to engage in this global peace ceremony. So what does this mean? It is not a global truce. It is actually a global legitimization of the occupation and silencing. It is actually a global legitimization of the occupation. So in that case, this entire agreement by the IOC and the Beijing Committee has been a defilement to the sacred tradition of the Olympic Games. So while they may feel that this action in support of peace and human rights with no violence by young people and by allies in solidarity with those inside Tibet might be a disgrace or disrespectful to the culture of that ceremony, my question to them is, how have they defiled the entire tradition of the Olympic Games by allowing a genocidal regime to host the Olympics not once, but 2 times?
I'll just briefly comment as well. For me, seeing all my fellow colleagues and friends carry out the peaceful actions in the past few days has been nothing but inspiring. This is our peaceful resistance. This is what millions of Uyghurs, Tibetans, Hong Kongers, Chinese, Southern Mongolians cannot do in China. There's no freedom of expression. There's no freedom of assembly. There's no freedom at all in China. But we have that freedom in Greece, even though due to external pressure, that freedom has been limited. And knowing this, all of these, arrests and detentions have happened probably because of external pressure from China in the land where democracy was born is just outrageous. And I want to reiterate the fact that us Uyghurs, Tibetans, although we have American, Canadian passports, we do not feel safe anywhere. Coming here today for me was extremely risky, as it was for all of my colleagues. I am Canadian, but I don't know what's going to happen to me. So I think for me, this was a very symbolic turn of events. And I hope that millions of, Uyghurs, Tibetans, and Chinese and Southern Mongolians inside mainland China are watching, and they're feeling proud because they cannot do this in China and we're able to do it here. So I salute all of my colleagues who have done it with so much courage, and they're so young. So, and to the IOC, I say, when will you own up to, to this and take your responsibility seriously? When, we have engaged with the IOC directly, senior executive staff, and they've told us Beijing has, promised to respect human rights during the Beijing Games. How are they going to do that? Where are the written commitments that you've promised to share with us? There are none. How will you make sure that human rights are actually protected during the Beijing Games? We're not asking you, outside of the Beijing Games, but how are you going to make sure that the human rights are going to be protected during the Beijing Games? And if athletes protest during the games, what will they face? Are they going to take responsibility for that? So really, for me, it's been nothing but inspiring to see my colleagues carry out these actions.
Thank you. A couple more questions from our webinar audience. So this is a question that has been asked a number of times, and it's something which the IOC themselves have been holding up. The fact that the Olympics is a huge world stage and all eyes will be turned to China. Is this not an opportunity for us to be further highlighting what the Chinese government are doing, as opposed to kind of blocking them out and saying they cannot host the games? So that the question is, what's your response to this? What's your response to the fact that the IOC have in the past and now claimed that by enabling China to host the games will actually affect the progress that we will have on human rights? So Pema, I'm going to turn to you first.
I think at the end of the day, I can look anybody in the face and just ask them, how can you do this when there is a genocide going on? When families, millions of people's lives are turned upside down, women are being sexually assaulted and raped, they're being forcibly sterilized. There are colleagues and friends of mine like Zumratai who have 40 family members that are missing or detained. How can we continue? How in anyone's conscious mind can they say this is okay? In any semblance of a doubt in their mind, how can they think it is okay? How can they ever imagine that this could be okay? How could anyone think that there is not a red line in the world for the word genocide? And this genocide, if anybody has taken the time to sit down and listen to the words of Uyghur people themselves during the Uyghur tribunals, you can see exactly how gory, how violent, how the opposite of the image of peace this genocide has been in the lives of Uyghur people. And to think about the occupation inside Tibet, children as young as 3 and 4 being separated from their families, and Orwellian levels of techno-dystopian digital security surveilling them, their every move, their thoughts. In January of this year, we had a 19-year-old Tibetan inside Tibet who started a WhatsApp group chat, a WeChat group chat. And because of this, he was beaten to death. And how can we say, oh yes, but this is a platform for us to talk about these issues in a peaceful, diplomatic manner? People's lives have been turned upside down and we must react accordingly in solidarity. Otherwise, what has become of humanity today?
I just honestly think that this is sports washing. There are no legitimate reasons to host the games during a genocide. It's doing that is simply endorsing the genocidal regime. And no matter what the IOC says, Olympic Games will always be and have always been political. It's not a political, it's not a politically neutral event. It's not. Countries are there. Countries have boycotted the Olympics before for different reasons. And as my colleague said it, if a genocide is not our red line, I really don't know what else is. And if governments and the international community is endorsing the Beijing Games, that means that they're complicit in an ongoing genocide. The IOC has multiple times told us and told everyone that this is about unity, peace, and inclusion. But how is that possible when us Uyghurs, Tibetans, are not even included in the games. Can they maybe tell us how Uyghurs are going to be there in Beijing during the games? Uyghurs don't have passports. They cannot travel freely. So how is that even inclusive? I love the Olympic Games. Growing up, I grew up in Canada where Winter Olympic Games are big, and I've always enjoyed watching them. I enjoy playing winter sports, and it would have been amazing to go actually there in person, but I can't. I just cannot. First of all, I cannot enter China because of obvious reasons, but also I'm actually here sitting and putting all of my relatives home in East Turkestan at risk. So I cannot accept the fact that the IOC or anyone else will tell me, oh, the games are an opportunity to talk about these issues. We're talking about these issues without the games. We're talking about this issue actively at the UN, European parliaments, in governments, during our campaigns. We don't need an Olympic Games to talk about these issues. Yes, this might have been the silver lining to bring the attention of the international community to these issues, but that was there way before the Olympics were handed to China. So I don't need anyone to tell me this is an opportunity that you need to grab, because it is not. It is putting our family members at risk. Who's going to guarantee that none of my relatives are actually now working in forced labor factories producing clothing and uniforms for the Olympic Games? Can anyone tell me where my relatives are? I don't think so. So I don't need anyone to tell me this is an opportunity, because it's not.
Thank you. We just have a few more questions before we start to wrap up. So we've obviously seen a number of actions this week, and this campaign has been ongoing for a while now. Could you speak about what else is happening in the run-up to the next 4 months? Where do you see this campaign going between now and the opening of the Games in February?
I will let my colleague Zumarta answer as well. And Mandy, I know you're facilitating, but if you would also want to say a few words, I know you're very involved in the campaign as well yourself. Two things I guess I can see to highlight, as I know my colleagues may raise other things. One of them is, making sure that we make the relationships and ties between the Beijing Winter Olympics and privately owned multinational corporations known to the global community, especially those. There are several that are US-based companies, such as Mars, which is the producer of Snicker bars, and Airbnb, and other companies that are American companies, and especially such as Mars, which has a global campaign right now called Here to Be Heard, which is about the promotion of women's voices in different platforms. What about the voice of Tursunay Ziawudun, a woman who was sexually assaulted behind bars in concentration camp in East Turkestan, who wrote a letter to them and they refused to reply? What about her voice? So I think these are the types of dialogues that we want to continue engaging with with companies that are based in the United States or other free democratic countries, yet are funneling funds and financial supporting and backing to the program that's taking place in Beijing in February 4th, starting from February 4th of 2022. We would also like to work more with the grassroots community, the average people, the viewers, whether you are a high school student who plays a winter sport and looks up to an athlete who may be traveling to Beijing and unknowingly participating in the sports washing of the genocide of Uyghur people, the occupation of Tibetan people, the crackdown on Hong Kong people, whether you are an avid fan who tunes in every 4 years to the Winter Olympics, there is a place for your voice in this movement, in this campaign, a place for you to stand in solidarity with Tibetans and Uyghurs and Hong Kongers. So in the coming months, we hope to be able to engage with more members of the international community, such as those.
Just to add on on that. We're hoping that sponsors of the foreign sponsors will take responsibility in this. And just 2 weeks ago, I'm based in Germany now, and we asked Allianz, which is the only German sponsor of the games, to drop their deals for the Beijing Olympic Games, and we brought in 2 survivors, Qalbunur Siddiq, who is an Uyghur woman who was formerly a teacher in 2 concentration camps in East Turkestan, who fled not long ago, and also Golok Jigme, who's a former Tibetan political prisoner. They've handed out a letter to Allianz asking the same thing, and they've met with the Allianz executive staff in Munich, where they're based, and they've tabled their demands, and Allianz has promised to get back to them. So we're expecting that they will. So in the upcoming months, we hope that more sponsors will agree to engage with us, because up to now, none of them have been really responsive. As you may know, there has been a hearing in the US, the CECC hearing with American sponsors. And during the hearing, some American representatives have asked them questions about the human rights violations in China, and none of them have dared to answer the question directly. So we cannot let corporations be complicit in a genocide, especially American and other foreign companies and sponsor corporations. They need to, if they really do care about human rights, which they all claim to do online, then they should act accordingly. We also hope to reach out to more athletes who are sympathetic to the cause, and we want to appeal to them that we're not your enemies. We want you to be our allies. If you go to Beijing for the games, just remember our plights, remember our faces, and just evaluate the risks and evaluate your position, your side of, which side you want to take. And I also appeal to parliament members around the world and G7 countries and other countries to take this issue seriously and to boycott the games simply.
Thank you, both of you. So just in addition to that, I just wanted to add that this is a really strong and building campaign, and we may only have 4 months left until the Games is due to open, but Tibetans, Uyghurs, Chinese dissidents, Hong Kongers, Southern Mongolians, and all those affected by the CCP are coming together, strategizing and planning for what more can be done. And I think the big ask, as both of my colleagues have said, is, people need to stand up and be allies. They need to stand with the people who are living under Chinese Communist Party repression and ensure that they're standing on the right side of history. And this is that moment. And this moment cannot pass without people ensuring that they know they are doing the right thing. We are speaking to broadcasters who will be complicit in the CCP's repression by broadcasting the genocide games. There is no doubt about that. And, our conversations are ongoing, and we are expecting there to be action over the next couple of months. So please do watch this space. We have a last few number of questions. Sorry, just bring up my chat. Philip, did you have another question? I'll repeat the question to our Zoom watchers in 2 seconds. No, but somebody said they couldn't hear.
I just wanted to ask about the IOC process and that rule that they've imposed?
This is a really interesting question. Thank you, Philip. So the question is about the IOC's Rule 50, which is about whether athletes are able to stage protests on the podium or whilst representing the Olympic Games. Zumrata and I actually had a conversation about this yesterday, so I'm going to pass directly to you because I know you have a response.
Thank you for the question. It is an interesting rule for sure. We know that in most of the events, sporting events, there has always been some sort of protest. And one thing that really attracted caught my attention was during the Tokyo Games, there were 2 Chinese athletes that won, I think, gold medal. And they were wearing 2 of them were wearing a badge with Mao Zedong on the podium. And for all of us here, at least who are familiar with Chinese history, Mao Zedong was a brutal oppressor, cultural revolution, if you recall it. My parents went through a cultural revolution. They went through famine. It was my grandfather, maternal grandfather was assassinated by the regime during the Cultural Revolution because he was an intellectual. So wearing his image on a badge on the Olympic podium reminded us of the terror of millions of people went through under that brutal regime. And the fact that they were allowed to wear this on the podium and that the only retaliation that they got from the IOC was a simple warning was simply outrageous to me, because I couldn't help but wonder, what if it was not 2 Chinese athletes, but non-Chinese athletes who were wearing badges in support of Uyghurs, Tibetans, Hong Kongers? What would have happened to them? I'm sure that they would have had a much more severe, retaliation or consequence. So for me, it was really interesting that the IOC claims that no one would be treated in a preferential way, but how come these 2 athletes were simply given a warning instead of another serious way of addressing the issue? So I mean, with Beijing coming up, if athletes do protest, which might happen, we're asking the IOC, and we've asked them, directly as well when we engage with them, how are you going to protect these athletes? What's going to happen? Because nothing is guaranteed. If you're a foreigner in China, it's no longer safe. Look at the 2 Michaels that have been, liberated after over 2 years. Being Canadian, American in China doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean what it used to mean before. So if athletes are protesting on the podium or even outside of the podium or engaging with Uyghurs or Tibetans, and they're being, disappeared or some serious charges, it's going to be the IOC's responsibility because they've put them in that situation. So we'll be watching for sure. And I, again, call on athletes to really think about this, but we do welcome any kind of, support from them. And so we hope that they'll be safe, and that, they'll stand up for justice.
Thank you. So this is our last question, because we do have some other interviews later on after this session. So the last question basically is, in a number of hours, literally, the flame will be handed over from the IOC to the Beijing organising committee. What message do you have to Thomas Bach and Juan Samaranch, who will be handing over the flame? What message do both of you have to these representatives and the actions that they will be taking. I'll pass to you first, Pama.
I think that in just a number of hours, as Mandy McKeown just mentioned, the IOC will be handing over this Olympic torch to Beijing 2022. And on behalf of Tibetan young people, students, activists from around the world, and also to amplify the voices of those Tibetans inside Tibet who wouldn't even be able to utter these words in the privacy of their own homes without fear of imprisonment, detention, forced disappearance. I think what I would say is that they're making a grave mistake. They are choosing to silence the voices of Tibetans and Uyghurs and Hong Kongers. It is no longer an act of neutrality. They can no longer hide behind a veil of neutrality. At the end of the day, what they are choosing to do is endorse and legitimize and put a stamp, seal, approval on a genocide and an occupation that will go down in history as one of the worst violations of human rights in the entire 21st century. And I think the fact that they are able to justify what they are doing without remorse just shows that perhaps the IOC is not the right person or the right entity to be holding the power of this decision. Perhaps it should be the hands of viewers, of athletes and governments and nations to be taking this power back from the IOC and saying, you are no longer responsible or fit to be determining where an Olympic Games can or cannot be taking place with the case of a genocide. I think that they have proven themselves to be unworthy of this power and decision making, and they have been proven themselves to be extremely short-sighted. Yesterday, in a speech that Thomas Bach gave, while I was sitting in detention, I was listening to his words, and he actually said, he talked about the equality of all people. And myself as a Tibetan, what I had done is I stood on the sidewalk and I actually spoke to just one journalist. And meanwhile, there were several East Asian Chinese men staring at me and taking photographs of me. And when the journalist came over, there was actually one person who came closer and almost like a comic book, stuck his ear out towards our conversation. And this is exactly a physical representation of what it is like to be a Tibetan inside Tibet today. That no matter what it is, your device, your school teacher, your neighbor, the CCP has created a system in which even your own private thoughts are not your own. And to think that this was happening inside a democratic country due to the pressure of the CCP, and while I was sitting inside detention, just for being a Tibetan person walking down the street in Olympia, Thomas Bach had the nerve to say that all people are treated equally because of the Olympics. This shows that he is completely out of touch, out of sync with the reality. Either that or even worse, he is aware of it and complicit in the sports washing and legitimization of this behavior and of this shift in global norms that we see developing around the world today. So I think regardless of whether it's ignorance or malicious intent, what I can say without a reasonable doubt, beyond a reasonable doubt, is that Thomas Bach does not have the legitimacy or authority to anymore decide or dictate what is a reasonable outcome for this 2022 Beijing Olympics. And that is why it is especially pertinent for sponsors of these games that are funneling in millions and millions of dollars into these games, and for viewers that are tuning in and making it possible, for athletes that are bringing the actual glory to the stage and to the slopes and to their platforms and arenas, for governments that are sending their diplomatic envoys that are actually putting a stamp of legitimacy to these games. It's now in our hands to say whether or not we think that the 2022 Olympics should go on despite a genocide and occupation.
To Thomas Bach and Juan Antonio Samaranch, I have one question. How can you sleep at night knowing that you're endorsing a genocide regime? How can you claim that the Olympics are politically neutral when it's clearly not? And how can you claim that these Olympic Games are inclusive when I have lost contact with my family since 2017? how many Uyghurs are going to be employed in forced labor factories to produce the garments that are going to be used for the Beijing Olympic Games? How many sponsors will agree and put their endorsement on the genocidal games? How many broadcasters will choose to also endorse this? So while we're here, and even as my colleague Pema said, in a democratic country protesting peacefully and being arrested and detained for this, imagine if this is happening in a democratic country in the middle of Europe, what is happening in China? Because for sure there will be protests by Uyghurs, Tibetans, as their last attempt to break free. Who's going to take responsibility for that? Who's going to monitor what is happening inside during the Beijing Games and after the Beijing Games? The 2008 Olympic Games served all of us as a lesson, should have served us as a lesson, but it didn't. That was a turning point for many people. And while the international community hoped that it would change things inside China, that it would bring democracy, it would bring human rights, it did the complete opposite. So what happens next after the 2021 Olympic Games? So really, my only question is, how can you sleep at night knowing that there's an ongoing genocide, millions of people being repressed and suppressed for their expression of their freedoms, and you just blindly turn an eye on this? For us, it's not acceptable. And that is why there should be no Olympic Games in Beijing.
Thank you. And thank you to all of you who have come here today and everyone who has joined us online. I just want to offer a last thanks to the lawyers who have stood up for our colleagues who were detained over the last couple of days, and we hope the hearing this morning goes very well, and we will be updating the media as soon as we have any news on this. So without any more to do, the Beijing torch ceremony is starting in about 2 hours. Yes, we wish you well, and thanks all for coming.